This scene and moment is just maximum scumbag doing whatever it takes to win. And not only does Tenji fully trust in Yuuichi, I mean, given what he just went through over 4 days, no matter what he does now in the future, he's totally going to believe that he's going to be there to help him. So he's never going to have any thoughts of pressing said panic button. Even though he didn't press it, he came close a couple of times because anyone would who's starting to starve. And then when it comes to the push, the sacrifice, the fact that he, literally did explain his plan. He didn't say specifics because, of course, he doesn't know specifics until they pop up. He has a general idea of what he wants to do, and the idea of using her as a distraction, it's something that still falls in line, but the idea of, saying and kind of, when she's off doing her whole, erotic nude bathing scene, and of course making it look super embarrassing, starting to even plant more seeds into probably the nicest guy on their team. The fact that as they're running, he pushes and she's just so dumbfounded, that's what you meant. It's this biggest act of betrayal, but because she's kind of crazy herself, she honestly kind of gets off on the idea that this man's such a sick bastard that he'll literally do whatever it takes to win, and she kind of loves that. I think it's so interesting because I really had no idea what would be the solution to winning this game with 2 or 3 people. Didn't even cross my mind, didn't even see other people mention it, but the idea of breaking friendships one by one and having them switch to his team, eventually there's only going to be 1 or 2 people left, and if that's the case, it's almost impossible for them to lose, because if there's one thing Yuuichi is very good at, it is manipulating the human psyche. And he does that with grace. It does very much seem like he cares about his friends, and I think that's why Tenji's betrayal hurt him so much, because, the Tenji that he knew in the classroom was someone who was very different than the Tenji that he started to experience here. But he still needed to test the guy in order to believe that, he's not going to ever pick that panic button up and press it if he is given another chance. So for this moment, for both of them, they kind of regained each other's trust, but the person who benefits the most is the crazy bastard who will do whatever it takes to win. Yuuichi now is going to be fully convinced that if he needs to shoot Tenji in the leg with a machine gun, he can do that and Tenji won't betray him. And if that's the way he needs to win, then that's the way he's going to have to do it. And I love the fact that, the way the show gets into psychos' heads, and there's a lot of psychos in this show, and the way you just thank your lucky stars that you're not on the receiving end of their wrath is fantastic. But I like the idea of how they went about breaking said trust, right? Because over the course of a few days, he spilled information on his own side, he pried for information, and I love the fact that he was looking for the one person who would be able to make the first part of this plan work, which is being manipulated by an attractive female. And that's why he was very adamant about only letting a female join the cast, because obviously he'd have a better shot at finding someone he can manipulate than if it was a guy, right? And I love the fact that the way the manipulation happened is these seeds of doubt, starting to pry a bit more on the deeper meaning of what this relationship means, showing him some erotic scenes, sacrificing, and then seeing someone next to you almost want to betray, saying she won't die from this fall, or you don't need my help. And then off screen, you see him say, you know what, I'm done. If you don't care about this girl, he literally pushed her off. You need to let her join up on our side so we can protect her. Ultimately, he decided he wanted to switch over. And I think it's a pretty brilliant way to really subvert expectations, not in a way that's just twisting for the sake of it, but rather this is such a carefully laid out trap that even if Yuuichi doesn't know the exact way it'll end, he definitely has ideas of where it wants to go. And the general idea of just having a couple more people, seeing what he's been able to accomplish with 3, just adding a single person isn't a lot that's going to make it seem like it's going to turn the tides or anything. But 4 people very well could be enough for him to win, because now all he needs is now 1 person to deliver food and keep it going. And you could easily have a couple of people be able to out-manipulate that group, especially if distrust is starting to pop up here. But what an episode for really getting inside some psychos' heads, and I love seeing the spectators once again because, one of them is now part of the group that Yuichi's working with. So you have the other kind of team advisor or overseer, whatever you want to call her, and pretty much anyone would be in the same boat. being like, well, of course I know how this is going to go, but as someone who's been watching these psychos for a while, she knows exactly like, yeah, this isn't going to go over well for you. And that's what makes the show so fun, is that rather than it just being like a kind of, okay, we're just trying to shock you for the sake of it, or there's no real point to this, there's a clear objective: destroy the game, get to the final finish line, and with each game, the craziness and the psychoticness of this man is going to amplify. But in doing so, you need to have a believable reason for the people working with him to not betray him or to not distrust in him. And the idea of essentially reaching your breaking point, and he came in at the last second, and it was a pretty believable reason why it took him so long. Hell, he didn't even lie about why he didn't tell him this to begin with, because he wanted to make sure that if I was, can I still be trusted after everything? The fact that he actually was able to navigate in such a way means no matter the shit that happens in future games, Tenji will stick by him, and for someone like Yuuichi, he can actually believe that he's not going to betray him, which will let him create even crazier plans in order to win, because as long as they win, that's all that matters. And in terms of full-on killing, he's not going to do anything as it stands that he believes guaranteed will kill them. Like, he'll push a girl off the cliff because he's convinced one of them will catch her, and he'll let a man starve for days on end because he's hoping that he won't press the panic button. But in terms of just pulling a gun out of thin air and shooting, like, that's not the type of story this is. This is more on the emotional, psychological trauma, and it does it with grace. The show's always had my interest just for the pure visual flair alone, the psychotic images, those hyper crisp, the wonky colors. It really just feels like you're getting inside character's head, and I love the fact that in this episode, Yuuichi almost accidentally won by having someone hit him, because if that happened, violence, you're not allowed to hit each other, right? So the fact of the matter is, like, if he would have punched him, like, it would have been game over there. And honestly, in a different alternate reality, I think that would have been hilarious to end the game in that way, and then transition into something even crazier than what we thought was going to happen. But in terms of hide and seek, I think they're living up to what I was hoping, because in terms of pure, like, possibilities, a giant forest where people could literally starve to death, I think is something that could really be fun, both with chase scenes, obviously the hide and seek being twisted to such a degree, and just the fact that you can really just sit around and break people's trust, because it's not like, you're rushing to a finish line. It's simply trying to find and waiting out the others so you can have those conversations without it feeling out of place, sort of a thing. And I love Yuichi's mind and how he, decodes these scenes. Like, when he was explaining the plan to the girl in terms of how he realized, well, what would you want to do? Well, you'd want to have the smallest person if you're playing hide and seek. Well, why would they choose their biggest? Well, it's because he's going to be without potentially food and stuff for some time. I love the fact that he's able to pick apart things from other people's actions, which then lets him shape his own in order to get that W. Of course, I leave another episode of Tomodachi Game just very impressed, liking it more and more, really hoping we get a season 2, because it feels like the games are getting crazier, and with that craziness getting upped, it just makes for way more entertaining episodes. Thoughts, if you have any, down below, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. So next time, everyone, take care and have a good one.